I turned, and there she was, sunlight catching every ripple around her. "You've grown up more than I realized," she whispered. I think that was the moment I finally understood what love could feel like. Before we continue, please like this video, subscribe, and let me know where you are watching from. The water had been cool against my skin just seconds before, the kind of relief you crave when the afternoon heat presses down on everything. I had been floating on my back, eyes closed, listening to nothing but the gentle lap of water against the pool's edge and the distant hum of cicadas in the trees. I thought I was alone. I thought I had the whole afternoon to myself, drifting in that half asleep state where time loses meaning and the world shrinks down to just you and the sun. Then I heard footsteps, soft and deliberate on the warm concrete. I opened my eyes and let my body right itself in the water, feet finding the bottom of the pool as I turned toward the sound. She stood at the edge, barefoot, wearing a pale sundress that moved gently in the breeze. Her hair was loose, falling past her shoulders, and she had this smile that made my chest tighten without warning. It was not the smile I remembered from all those years of birthday parties and summer barbecues. It was something else entirely, something that made me suddenly aware of how exposed I felt, standing there in the shallow end with water dripping down my face. I didn't know anyone was home. I managed my voice coming out quieter than I intended. She tilted her head slightly, that smile deepening just enough to let me know she had caught the nervousness in my tone. She took a step closer to the water, close enough that I could see the way the sunlight played across her collarbone, the way her eyes held mine without looking away. "I came home early," she said, her voice low and easy. "Looks like you helped yourself to the pool without asking." There was no edge to her words, no real accusation, just something playful, something that felt like a door opening between us that had never been opened before. My heart kicked hard against my ribs, and I realized I had stopped breathing for a second. She crouched down at the edge, dipping her fingers into the water, watching me with an expression I could not quite read but felt everywhere. "Your friend and his dad had to run into town," she said, settling herself down at the pool's edge with an easy grace that made it impossible to look away. "Something about picking up supplies for the deck project. They'll be gone for a while." I nodded, trying to find something casual to say, but my mind had gone quiet in a way that felt both uncomfortable and thrilling. I had known her son since middle school. I had been in this house 100 times, eaten at her dinner table, slept on the couch in the living room during weekend sleepovers. But standing here now, watching her slip her feet into the water and lean back on her hands, I felt like I was seeing her for the first time. She looked at me with a kind of openness that made my stomach flip. "So you just decided to make yourself at home?" "I figured nobody would mind," I said, moving a little closer to where she sat, but keeping enough distance to feel safe. It was too hot to just sit inside. "Smart choice," she replied, her eyes following the water as it moved around my waist. She glanced up, catching my gaze, and holding it a beat longer than felt natural. "You look good, by the way. College must be treating you well." Heat climbed up the back of my neck that had nothing to do with the sun. "Thanks, it's been good. Busy, but good." She smiled at that, a soft laugh escaping her lips that sounded warmer than anything I remembered. "Busy with classes or busy with other things?" There was something in the way she asked that made the question feel heavier, like she was testing me to see how I would respond. I shrugged, trying to keep my expression neutral. "A little of both, I guess." "I'm sure," she said, her smile widening just enough to let me know she was enjoying this. She kicked her feet gently in the water, the motion sending small waves across the surface. "You were always the quiet one. I remember thinking you were shy." "Maybe I was," I admitted, feeling my heart beat faster as she tilted her head and studied me with renewed interest. And now, she asked, her voice dropping just slightly, enough that it felt like the space between us had shrunk, even though neither of us had moved. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. She saw it, the hesitation, and her smile softened into something that felt almost affectionate. She reached behind her and grabbed a towel that had been folded on one of the lounge chairs, leaning forward to hand it to me. Here, she said, in case you want to get out. I took it from her, and as I did, her fingers brushed against my shoulder just lightly, but the contact sent a jolt through me that I felt all the way down to my fingertips. She did not pull away immediately. Instead, she let her hand linger there for just a moment, her thumb grazing my skin in a way that could have been accidental but felt completely intentional. Thanks, I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. She pulled her hand back slowly and settled into her spot again, watching me with an expression I could not quite name. There was amusement there, but also something deeper, something that made me feel like I was being seen in a way I had never experienced before. Not as her son's friend, not as the kid who used to play video games in the basement, as someone else entirely. You've changed, she said after a moment, her tone thoughtful. I mean it. You carry yourself differently now. I did not know what to say to that, so I just looked at her, trying to understand what she meant, trying to figure out if I was reading too much into every word, every glance, every small movement. She leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on her knees, and the way her dress shifted made my throat go dry. Are you nervous around me? The question caught me off guard, and I almost laughed because, of course, I was nervous. How could I not be? But I tried to play it off, shaking my head with a smile that felt too tight. No, why would I be? She raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. Because you've barely looked me in the eye since I sat down. That was not true, but maybe it felt true. Maybe I had been looking everywhere except directly at her because looking at her felt too intense, too much like stepping over some invisible line I was not sure I was allowed to cross. I'm looking at you now, I said, forcing myself to meet her gaze head on. You are, she agreed, and the way she said it made my chest tighten again. She held my eyes for a long, quiet moment, and I swear I could feel the air between us shift into something heavier, something charged. She glanced toward the house, then back at me, her smile returning, but softer now, more private. They won't be back for at least an hour. Maybe we just stay here for a while. Enjoy the quiet. It sounded innocent enough, but the way she said it, the way she was looking at me, made it feel like she was offering something more than just conversation by the pool. If you're enjoying this moment, like and subscribe and drop a comment to tell me your favorite parts so far. She stood up from the edge, and for a second, I thought she was going to walk away, back into the house where everything would return to normal, and I could convince myself I had imagined the charge in the air between us. But instead, she stepped down into the pool, still wearing that sundress, the fabric darkening immediately as the water soaked into it. My breath caught as she moved toward me, the dress clinging to her in ways that made it impossible to think straight. The pool suddenly felt smaller, the space between us collapsing into something intimate and deliberate. She stopped just a few feet away, the water reaching her waist, and she looked at me with that same unreadable expression, equal parts amusement and something far more dangerous. I opened my mouth to say something, anything to break the silence, but before I could get a word out, she swept her hand across the surface and splashed water directly into my face. I sputtered, blinking water out of my eyes, and when I looked at her again, she was laughing, a real, full laugh that echoed off the surrounding trees and made my chest ache in the best way. You look too serious, she said, still grinning. I had to do something. I laughed too, the tension easing just enough for me to breathe again. You could have just said something. Where's the fun in that? She shot back, moving a little closer now, close enough that I could see the water droplets clinging to her collarbone, the way her hair had started to curl slightly from the moisture. She tilted her head, considering me with a playful challenge in her eyes. Bet you can't hold your breath as long as I can. I raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Completely, she said, and there was something in her tone that made it clear she was daring me, testing to see if I would rise to it. All right, I said, feeling a grin pull at my lips despite the nervous energy racing through me. You're on. She counted down from 3, and we both ducked under the water at the same time. The world went quiet beneath the surface, nothing but the muffled pressure of water in my ears and the distorted light filtering down from above. I could see her across from me, her eyes open, watching me through the rippling space between us. She moved closer, her body gliding through the water with an ease that made my pulse quicken. I held my breath, feeling the burn start to build in my lungs, but I refused to surface first. She drifted even closer, close enough now that if I reached out, I could touch her. Her hand brushed against mine underwater, just a graze of fingertips, but it sent a shock through me that had nothing to do with the temperature of the water. My lungs were screaming now, but I stayed under, matching her determination with my own stubbornness. Finally, she pushed up toward the surface, and I followed half a second later, both of us gasping for air and laughing at the same time. You almost beat me, she said, her voice breathless, her face flushed in a way that made her look younger, more alive. Almost, I agreed, still catching my breath. You're tougher than you look. I could say the same about you, she replied, and the way she said it made the words feel heavier, like she meant something beyond the game. She moved to the side of the pool, reaching for one of the inflatable floats that had drifted near the edge. I moved to help her and steadying it as she adjusted the position, and when my hands gripped the edge to hold it in place, she glanced down at them and then back up at me with a smile that made my stomach flip. You're better with your hands than I expected, she said, her voice low and smooth. I froze for a second, heat flooding my face as my mind immediately went somewhere it probably should not have gone. But then she gestured toward the float, her smile widening just enough to let me know she had caught my reaction and found it entertaining. With the float, I mean, she added, her eyes sparkling with mischief. What did you think I meant? I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding, shaking my head as I released the float and let it drift away. Nothing. I didn't think anything. She laughed again, softer now, and moved closer to me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off her skin, despite the coolness of the water. Her expression shifted, the playfulness fading into something more serious, more open. Can I ask you something? She said, her voice quieter now, more careful. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine like she was trying to decide whether or not to say what was on her mind. Finally, she spoke. What do you really want? The question caught me off guard, not because it was complicated, but because no one had ever asked me like that before. Not my parents, not my friends, not anyone. They always asked about my major, about my plans, about what I was going to do with my life. But she was asking something different. She was asking about feeling, about the things that mattered beneath all the surface expectations. I hesitated, my mind racing to find an answer that felt honest without being too vulnerable. She waited, floating there in front of me, her eyes never leaving mine. The silence stretched between us, heavy and electric, and I realized she was not going to let me deflect or brush it off with something easy. I don't know, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I guess I want to feel like I matter, like I'm more than just going through the motions. Her expression softened, and she reached out, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. You don't have to pretend around me. I see you. I really do. The words hit me harder than I expected, and I felt something crack open inside my chest, something I had been keeping carefully guarded. She saw it too, the shift in my expression, and she moved even closer, her hand sliding down from my shoulder to rest in the water between us. Then, so slowly, it felt like the world had tilted into slow motion. Her fingers found mine underwater, just the tips at first, a barely there contact that sent electricity racing up my arm. She did not pull away. Instead, she let her fingers linger there, testing, waiting to see if I would close the distance or retreat. I did not move. I could not move. Her eyes held mine, and in that moment, everything else fell away. The pool, the house, the world beyond the two of us. It was just her and me, and the impossible weight of everything unspoken. Then, from somewhere in the distance, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car door slamming shut. She pulled her hand back immediately, her expression shifting from open to guarded in the space of a heartbeat. She glanced toward the house, then back at me, and the look she gave me was full of something I could not name, but felt deep in my bones. They were back. Like this, if you feel the tension, subscribe and tell me what you do in this moment. Dinner felt like the longest hour of my life. I sat across from my friend, trying to focus on his stories about the hardware store and the guy who had argued with his dad about lumber prices, but my attention kept drifting. She sat at the end of the table, calm and composed, passing dishes and refilling glasses like nothing had happened at all, but every now and then her eyes would find mine across the table, and there would be this small, private smile that made my pulse kick into overdrive. No one else seemed to notice. Her husband asked me about school. Her son complained about having to help with the deck tomorrow. Everything was normal on the surface, but underneath, I felt like I was barely holding it together. When dinner finally ended, I volunteered to help clear the table, but she waved me off with a gentle smile and told me to relax. I took the excuse and slipped out the back door onto the porch, needing the cool evening air to clear my head. The sun had set, leaving behind a deep indigo sky scattered with stars, and the sound of crickets filled the quiet spaces between my thoughts. I leaned against the porch railing, gripping the wood with both hands, trying to make sense of what had happened in the pool, what was still happening even now in the silence of my own mind. The door opened behind me, soft and careful, and I knew it was her before I even turned around. "Thought you might want something cold," she said, holding out a glass of iced tea. I took it from her, my fingers brushing hers in the exchange, and the contact felt just as electric as it had in the water. "Thanks." She did not go back inside. Instead, she settled onto the porch step beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched, and the proximity sent my heart racing all over again. She looked out at the yard, at the darkening trees and the fireflies beginning to flicker in the grass, and for a while, neither of us spoke. Do you ever feel like people only see the role you play? She asked finally, her voice quiet and thoughtful, like they look at you and see what you're supposed to be, but they don't really see you. I turned to look at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her tone. She was still staring out at the yard, her expression open in a way I had not seen before. "Yeah," I said softly, "all the time." She nodded slowly, like she had expected that answer. I think that's the hardest part, feeling invisible, even when you're right there in front of everyone. There was a weight to her words that made my chest ache, and I realized in that moment that she had been carrying this for longer than I could have guessed. She looked at me then, her eyes reflecting the dim light from the kitchen window behind us, and I saw something raw and honest there that took my breath away. "You make me feel seen again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I did not know what to say to that. Words felt too small, too inadequate to hold the magnitude of what she had just given me. So instead, I reached for her hand where it rested on the step between us, my fingers covering hers gently, tentatively, waiting to see if she would pull away. She did not. Instead, she turned her hand over and laced her fingers through mine, her grip firm and warm and real. We sat like that for a long moment, the night wrapping around us, the crickets humming their constant rhythm in the background. Her thumb traced slow, deliberate circles on the back of my hand, and I felt every single movement, oh, like it was writing something permanent into my skin. She leaned her head against my shoulder, the weight of it light but grounding, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. It was tender in a way that had nothing to do with desire and everything to do with trust, with allowing herself to be vulnerable in a way I suspected she had not been in a long time. This is dangerous, you know, she whispered, her voice soft against the fabric of my shirt. I know, I whispered back, my throat tight with the truth of it, but neither of us moved. We stayed there, her head on my shoulder, her hand in mine, the world around us quiet and patient and full of everything we could not say out loud. I memorized the feeling of her fingers between mine, the warmth of her beside me, the way the night air smelled like cut grass in summer, and something shifting irreversibly inside my chest. I did not know how long we stayed like that. Time felt suspended, stretched thin and infinite all at once. I only knew that when she finally lifted her head and looked at me, her eyes were soft and a little sad, like she was already mourning something that had not yet ended. We should go back inside, she said quietly, though she made no move to stand. Yeah, I agreed, my voice rough. But we stayed a moment longer, hands still linked, the space between us filled with everything we both knew and everything we were too afraid to admit. If you've ever felt this kind of connection, tap, like, and share your favorite moment below. The morning came too soon, the sky just beginning to lighten with that soft gray glow that comes before the sun breaks over the horizon. I had packed my bag the night before, moving quietly through the guest room while everyone slept, and now I stood by my car in the driveway, keys in hand, trying to convince myself that leaving was the right thing to do. The house was silent behind me, the windows dark except for one light in the kitchen that cast a faint yellow glow across the porch. I thought about getting in the car and driving away without saying goodbye, sparing us both the awkwardness of pretending everything was normal. But before I could make that choice, the front door opened and she stepped out, barefoot again, wearing a loose cardigan over her clothes, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look softer, more vulnerable. She walked toward me slowly, her arms crossed over her chest like she was guarding herself against the early morning chill, but her eyes were warm and steady on mine. She stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her lips pressed together like she was holding something back. You were going to leave without saying goodbye, she said quietly. And it was not an accusation, just a statement of fact. I shrugged, trying for a lightness I did not feel. Figured it would be easier that way, for both of us. She shook her head, taking another step closer, and the distance between us shrank into something almost unbearable. Don't do that. Don't pretend. This didn't mean something. The words hit me square in the chest, and I felt all the careful defenses I had been building crumble in an instant. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same ache reflected in her expression that I had been carrying since yesterday. I don't know what this is, I said, my voice rough and unsteady, but I know I've never felt this way before, not with anyone. Her breath hitched, just slightly, and I saw her eyes glisten in the pale morning light. She closed the distance between us in 2 steps, her hand lifting to my cheek, her palm warm against my skin. The touch was gentle but deliberate, like she was anchoring herself to me, like she needed to feel that I was real. I've been holding my breath around you since yesterday, she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to break my heart. You make me feel alive in a way I forgot was possible. I did not know how to respond to that, did not know how to put into words the way my entire body felt, like it was leaning toward her, drawn by something deeper than logic or reason. So I just stood there, her hand on my cheek, my eyes locked on hers, feeling the weight of everything we had not said pressing down on us. She looked at my lips just for a second, and that single glance sent a shock of heat through me. I leaned in, barely, just enough to close the space between us by a fraction, and I felt her breath against my mouth, warm and unsteady. Then she kissed me. It was soft and slow, nothing rushed or desperate, just honest in a way that made my knees weak. Her lips moved against mine with a tenderness that felt like a confession, like she was giving me something she had been holding back for longer than I could understand. I felt her other hand come up to rest against my chest, over my heart, and I wondered if she could feel how hard it was pounding. Time seemed to stop, the world narrowing down to just the two of us, the warmth of her mouth, the way her fingers curled slightly into the fabric of my shirt, the quiet sound of our breathing mixing together in the space between us. It was aching and beautiful and completely consuming, and I wanted to hold on to it forever. When she finally pulled back, just enough to look at me. Her eyes were bright and her lips were curved into a real, unguarded smile that took my breath away all over again. Thank you, she whispered. I blinked, confused, my mind still reeling from the kiss. For what? Her smile softened and she reached up to brush a strand of hair away from my forehead, her touch lingering there for just a moment, for reminding me what it feels like to be wanted, not needed, wanted. The words settled over me like a weight and a gift at the same time, and I felt something shift inside my chest, something that told me this moment was going to stay with me for the rest of my life. I'm not going to forget this, I said, my voice low and fierce with the truth of it. I'm not going to forget you. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears that did not fall, and I saw her swallow hard, trying to keep herself together. She was not sad exactly, just overwhelmed, like the emotions were too big to hold inside her chest without spilling over. She took a step back, her hand dropping from my face, and the absence of her touch felt like a physical loss. She wrapped her arms around herself again, composing herself with visible effort, and when she spoke, her voice was steadier, but quieter. This can't be more than this moment, she said, and I heard the regret in her tone, the finality. You know that, right? I did know. I had known it from the beginning, from the first second her fingers had brushed mine underwater. But knowing it and accepting it were two different things, and the reality of it hurt more than I had prepared myself for. I know, I said, my throat tight. She gave me one last look, her eyes full of everything we could not say out loud, everything we were leaving unfinished. Then she turned and walked back toward the house, her steps slow and deliberate, her shoulders squared like she was carrying something heavy. I watched her go, unable to move, unable to look away. She did not turn around. She just opened the front door and disappeared inside, the light from the kitchen swallowing her silhouette. And then I was alone again in the driveway with nothing but the sound of birds beginning to wake in the trees. I got into my car, and sat there for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I replayed every second, every touch, every word, trying to commit it all to memory before it could fade into something less real. Just as I reached to turn the key in the ignition, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. I picked it up, my pulse spiking, and saw her name on the screen. The message was simple, just three words and an emoji: drive safe. And thank you. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling something bittersweet and warm spread through my chest. I typed back a reply, deleted it, typed again, then finally just sent a single heart emoji in return. I put the phone down, started the car, and pulled out of the driveway. As the sun finally broke over the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and pink, I glanced in the rearview mirror once, saw the house growing smaller behind me, and felt the weight of everything I was leaving behind settle into my bones. But I was smiling, bittersweet and aching, but smiling. Weeks passed and I fell back into the rhythm of my life. Classes, assignments, late nights at the library, weekends with friends who talked about nothing and everything at the same time. On the surface, everything looked the same, but underneath, I felt different, changed in ways I could not quite explain to anyone, even if I had wanted to try. I caught myself thinking about her at random moments. In the middle of a lecture, my mind would drift to the way she had laughed by the pool, the sound of it echoing off the trees. Walking back to my dorm at night, I would remember the way her hand had felt in mine on the porch, the slow circles her thumb had traced against my skin. Lying in bed before sleep, I would replay the kiss in my mind, the softness of it, the honesty. I never reached out. I respected the boundary she had set, understood the impossibility of what we had shared, but I kept the memory close, held it like something precious that I was allowed to carry with me, even if I could never return to it. The more time that passed, the more I began to understand what had really happened between us. It had not been just attraction, though that had been part of it. It had been something deeper. It had been the experience of being truly seen by another person, of being understood in a way that felt both terrifying and freeing. She had chosen me, even if only for a moment, and that choice had left a mark I would carry for the rest of my life. I started living differently after that. I became more present in conversations, more willing to let people see the parts of me I usually kept hidden. I stopped pretending that I had everything figured out, stopped putting on the mask of casual indifference that I had worn for so long. I let myself feel things deeply, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it scared me. One Friday night, I ended up at a party in someone's apartment off campus. Music pounded through the small rooms. People crowded into every available space, and the air was thick with laughter and the smell of cheap beer. A girl I recognized from one of my classes started talking to me, standing close, her hand brushing my arm as she leaned in to be heard over the noise. She was pretty, and she was clearly interested, and a few months ago I would have leaned into it without thinking twice. But standing there with her looking at me, smiling, waiting for me to respond, I felt the difference between what she was offering and what I had experienced that morning in the driveway. Surface attraction versus real connection. The difference was everything. I smiled at her, polite but distant, and excused myself to step outside onto the balcony. The night air was cool and clear, the city lights stretching out below me, and I felt a quiet gratitude settle over me for what she had taught me, for the way she had opened something inside me that I had not known was closed. I thought about her words that first day by the pool, the way she had looked at me and said, "You've grown up more than I realized." At the time, I had not understood what she meant, but standing there on that balcony, looking out at the night, I realized she had been right. That moment had changed me. It had shown me what it felt like to connect with someone beyond the surface, to be vulnerable and seen and chosen all at once. I wondered if she thought about me too, if she replayed those moments in her mind the way I did, if she felt the same bittersweet ache when she remembered the way we had stood together in the driveway, the way the world had seemed to hold its breath around us, I would probably never know. And maybe that was okay. The ache of what was gone would always be there, a quiet weight I carried in the spaces between everything else, but so would the warmth of what remained, the memory of her hand in mine, the sound of her laughter, the way she had looked at me like I mattered, like I was more than just going through the motions. I leaned against the balcony railing and let myself feel both things at once, the loss and the gift, the ending and the beginning, and I smiled, small and private, into the night. Like this video, subscribe and let me know. Have you ever had a moment with someone that changed the way you saw love? I'd really appreciate it if you could share your thoughts about my videos in the comments. Your feedback helps me improve and create even better content for you. Thank you.